Las Vegas, a city that never sleeps. A city where every corner glitters with promise, fortune, and spectacle. It is a place built on dreams, where the extraordinary becomes the everyday, and the impossible comes to life under the blinding glow of neon lights. And among this kingdom of illusions, no names shined brighter than Siegfried and Roy. For decades, they weren't just performers. They were legends, men who pushed the boundaries of reality itself. On their stage, magic wasn't sleight of hand. It was a living, breathing force. Their shows weren't small tricks or card illusions. They dealt in grandeur, in spectacle, bending fire, disappearing elephants, and above all, commanding some of the most dangerous and magnificent creatures on earth. White lions and tigers. Audiences gasped not just at the beauty, but at the audacity. To see a man stand shoulder to shoulder with a predator, to caress its fur, to look into its eyes, and emerge unscathed. It was more than entertainment. It was a promise of trust between human and beast, a fragile contract that seemed unbreakable. But even the brightest illusions hide shadows, and on October 3rd, 2003, that shadow emerged. What began as a celebration, a performance before thousands of fans on Roy Horn's 59th birthday, turned into something unthinkable. That night, in front of a stunned crowd inside the Mirage Hotel and Casino, the illusion shattered. The danger audiences had always ignored was suddenly real. The performance that was meant to dazzle became a scene of chaos, blood, and horror. On that stage, under the blazing lights, Roy Horn was not the master of the beast, but its prey, and the world would never look at Siegfried and Roy, or Las Vegas entertainment, the same way again. Before the tragedy, before the mirage, before the fame and fortune, Siegfried and Roy were just two boys from war-torn Germany. Dreamers in a world trying to rebuild itself. Siegfried Fischbacher was the quiet craftsman, a boy fascinated by the art of illusion. As a child, he studied the classics of magic, teaching himself tricks with nothing but determination and scraps of inspiration. For him, magic was more than entertainment. It was escape, a way to create wonder in a world scarred by darkness. Roy Horn, by contrast, was fire, adventurous, daring, and fearless. From a young age, he was drawn not to cards or coins, but to animals. He had a connection to creatures that others could not understand. While most kept their distance, Roy leaned closer. He believed he could speak their silent language, and in time, many believed he truly could. Fate brought these two unlikely souls together aboard a cruise ship in the late 1950s, where Siegfried was performing small magic acts for passengers. Roy was a cabin boy, restless and hungry for more. One evening, after a show, Siegfried asked for his thoughts. Roy had one bold suggestion. What if, instead of rabbits or doves, you used a cheetah? It was outrageous, it was dangerous, it was impossible, and yet, it was the spark that would change everything. Together, they began to shape a new kind of magic, one that blended spectacle with danger, elegance with raw power. Lions, leopards, and eventually the rarest of them all, white tigers, became their partners on stage. To audiences, it was mesmerizing. The animals didn't just appear as props, they were co-stars, majestic, unpredictable, and breathtaking. By the time they arrived in Las Vegas in the late 1960s, Siegfried and Roy were already legends in the making. But Vegas was different. Bigger, louder, more dangerous. Here, magic had to be more than sleight of hand. It had to rival the city itself. And Siegfried and Roy were ready. Their shows grew into colossal productions. Disappearing elephants, levitating tigers, entire illusions built around these magnificent beasts. They weren't just magicians, they were architects of wonder. For decades, their residency at the Mirage Hotel and Casino drew millions. Night after night, the theatre pulsed with energy as audiences gasped in disbelief. The impossible became routine. The dangerous became beautiful. But behind the shimmering lights and thunderous applause lay an unspoken truth. Every performance was a gamble. Every night, Roy walked into the cage of nature itself. A predator, weighing hundreds of pounds with teeth and claws designed for survival, was asked to become a performer. To the audience, it looked effortless. Roy's calm voice, his gentle gestures, his unshakable confidence gave the illusion of control. And perhaps, for years, it seemed as though control was real. That love, discipline, and trust could tame even the fiercest of instincts. Yet nature has its own rules, its own limits. And no matter how deep the bond, the line between wonder and danger was always there, hiding in the shadows of the stage. A line that one day would be crossed. It was October 3rd, 2003. Roy Horn's 59th birthday. The Mirage Hotel and Casino was buzzing with anticipation. The showroom was sold out, every seat filled with eager fans, tourists, locals, and celebrities, all gathered to witness one of Las Vegas's most legendary acts. For decades, Siegfried and Roy had dazzled audiences with their unique brand of magic. And on this night, the atmosphere was electric. The stage was alive with music, light, and illusion. Siegfried and Roy moved with practiced grace, weaving between spectacle and suspense, every beat perfectly timed, every movement flawless. To the audience, it was another night of wonder. But backstage, a storm was quietly building. That night, one of their most celebrated co-stars was scheduled to perform. Mantacore, a 380-pound white tiger. Towering, powerful, and strikingly beautiful, Mantacore had worked alongside Roy countless times before. To many, the bond between Roy and Mantacore was unbreakable. Roy often referred to his animals as family, partners, not possessions. And Mantacore, in particular, was one of his favorites. But something about this night was different. Trainers backstage noticed Mantacore seemed distracted. His ears flicked nervously. His eyes scanned the crowd, the lights, the chaos. Was it the booming music, the energy of the crowd, or perhaps something only the tiger himself understood? No one could say for certain. But still, the show went on. At first, everything appeared as usual. Roy led Mantacore across the stage with confidence, his voice calm, his gestures smooth. The audience leaned forward, mesmerized by the sight of a man and beast moving as one. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Mantacore broke from the routine. His massive body shifted, his focus snapped, and before anyone could react, the tiger lunged. With terrifying speed, Mantacore's jaws clamped around Roy's neck. Gasps turned to screams as the audience watched in horror. At first, many believed it was part of the act, another daring illusion. But as Mantacore dragged Roy across the stage, the truth became horrifyingly clear. Blood began to spill onto the bright stage floor. This was no trick. This was real. Panic erupted in the theater. Stagehands rushed forward, desperately trying to intervene. But how do you stop a 380-pound predator in attack mode? Siegfried stood frozen, unable to process what was unfolding before his eyes. His partner, his friend of over 40 years, was being mauled in front of a screaming crowd of thousands. Trainers and security swarmed the stage, shouting commands, waving props, trying anything to distract the tiger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they forced Mantacore to release his grip. But the damage was already catastrophic. Mantacore's bite had punctured Roy's carotid artery. He was losing blood rapidly, every second critical. His windpipe was crushed. He collapsed, motionless, as his team pulled him away from the animal and desperately tried to stop the bleeding. The scene was chaos. Some audience members wept. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. For decades, Siegfried and Roy had promised wonder, magic, and the impossible. On this night, they delivered something else entirely: terror. Roy Horn, the master of the beasts, lay clinging to life. And Mantacore, The magnificent tiger who had once symbolized the beauty of their act now symbolized the danger that had always lingered beneath the surface. In just a few seconds, the illusion that had captivated the world was shattered forever. As chaos consumed the Mirage Theatre, paramedics pushed through the terrified crowd. Roy Horn's body was limp, his clothes soaked in blood. His windpipe had been crushed, his carotid artery torn open. Every second mattered. Onlookers stood frozen, some weeping, others whispering in disbelief. For years, they had cheered for the magic. But tonight, they were witnessing its unraveling. The illusion was gone. What remained was raw, brutal reality. Roy was rushed out of the building, carried through a sea of horrified faces. Outside, the neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip burned brightly, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding in their shadow. Inside the ambulance, the situation was critical. Roy was slipping in and out of consciousness, blood pressure dropping, oxygen levels plummeting. His breathing was shallow, each gasp a fight against the crushing damage to his throat. Medics worked frantically, pumping fluids, forcing air into his lungs, trying to stabilize him for the hospital. By the time they reached University Medical Center, Roy's condition was dire. Doctors and surgeons were waiting. The theater lights had gone dark, but here, in the fluorescent glow of the emergency room, the true performance began. One that would determine whether Roy Horn lived or died. The injuries were catastrophic. The tiger's powerful jaws had not only crushed Roy's windpipe, but also severed blood vessels critical to survival. His spine had been damaged, his body weakened by blood loss. For hours, surgeons worked relentlessly. Every second was borrowed time. Outside the operating room, Siegfried waited. His face pale, his eyes hollow. For decades, the two had been inseparable. Partners on stage, brothers in life. Now, Siegfried could do nothing but sit in silence, praying that his friend would survive. Around the hospital, fans and reporters gathered, the city buzzing with disbelief. Las Vegas, the city of dreams, had just witnessed its brightest illusion shattered in front of thousands of witnesses. Roy's fight for life stretched into the night. Surgeons battled against massive blood loss, swelling in his brain, and the collapse of his airway. Hours passed. Against all odds, his heart kept beating. His body refused to surrender. Finally, when dawn broke over the Nevada desert, the impossible had happened once more. Roy Horn survived, but survival came at a cost. Roy would never be the same. The once commanding figure, who had tamed the wildest beasts with a glance and a gesture, was now paralyzed on his left side. His speech was slurred, his mobility shattered. The stage, where he had lived for decades, would never welcome him back in the same way again. Yet in his struggle, there was resilience. For the man who once defied death nightly with tigers and lions, this new battle, against his own body, would become his greatest performance of all. The attack sent shockwaves far beyond the walls of the Mirage Theatre. Within hours, the story spread across the globe. Headlines blared, "Roy Horn mauled on stage." News anchors struggled to describe the horror witnessed by thousands. For fans, it was unthinkable. For the entertainment industry, it was a nightmare come true. But as the dust settled, questions began to rise. What had really happened that night? Was Mantacore acting out of aggression, or was the truth more complicated? Some experts argued the simplest explanation: a predator's instinct. Tigers, no matter how trained, are wild animals. To them, a stumble, a sudden movement, even a flash of light can trigger a response. A 380-pound tiger does not think in applause or choreography. It thinks in survival. Others offered a different theory. Witnesses claimed that Roy had faltered before the tiger lunged, that he may have suffered a mini-stroke on stage. If true, Mantacore may not have been attacking, but reacting, trying in his own way to drag Roy to safety. What looked like violence might have been something else entirely, an act of confused protection. Through it all, Siegfried remained unwavering. He insisted Mantacore was not to blame. To him, the tiger was not a villain, but a victim of circumstance. Siegfried defended him fiercely, refusing to allow Mantacore to be destroyed after the attack. In his eyes, Mantacore was family, not a monster. And Roy agreed. Even as he lay recovering, unable to speak clearly, he made it known that his beloved tiger had not meant him harm. Until his final days, Roy Horn maintained one belief above all, that Mantacore had acted out of concern, not malice, that their bond, tested in blood, had not been broken in spirit. But the debate raged on. For some, the attack was proof that wild animals could never truly be tamed, no matter how deep the trust. For others, it was a tragic accident, a reminder that the line between wonder and danger is thinner than anyone dares admit. In the end, the truth may never be fully known. Was it instinct? Was it protection? Or was it simply the raw unpredictability of nature? What is certain is that in those few seconds, the greatest illusion of Siegfried and Roy, the illusion of control, was shattered forever. The tragedy of October 3rd, 2003, marked the end of an era. An act that had once defined the very spirit of Las Vegas was silenced in a single night. The Mirage stage, once the home of fire, illusions, and living legends, would never again echo with the same magic. For Roy Horn, survival became his greatest performance. Though his body was broken, his spirit refused to surrender. He endured years of grueling rehabilitation, relearning how to walk, how to speak, how to live. To many, he was no longer the man commanding lions and tigers under the spotlight. But to Siegfried, to their fans, and to those who knew his strength, Roy remained a fighter. He had defied the jaws of death and continued on, even when the stage lights dimmed. Siegfried never left his partner's side. For nearly 2 decades after the attack, the two men lived quietly, away from the roar of the crowds, but still bound by the same love of magic, animals, and each other. To the public, they were legends. To each other, they were family. Then, in 2020, the world faced a different kind of tragedy. Roy Horn passed away from complications of COVID-19 at the age of 75. For Siegfried, it was the loss of a brother, a partner, and the other half of a lifelong dream. Less than a year later, Siegfried himself succumbed to cancer. With his passing, an extraordinary chapter in entertainment history came to a close. And yet, legends never truly vanish. Siegfried and Roy live on in the memories of millions who once sat in awe, eyes wide, as tigers prowled under blinding lights and impossible illusions became real. Their influence shaped generations of performers who dared to dream bigger, to push boundaries, to make the unbelievable tangible. But their story is more than one of triumph and tragedy. It is a cautionary tale, a reminder that when human ambition reaches into the heart of nature, wonder and danger walk side by side. For decades, they danced with the untamable, balancing trust and risk on a razor's edge. And though the final curtain fell in tragedy, their names remain etched in history as pioneers who redefined the very meaning of spectacle. Siegfried and Roy gave the world magic. They gave us wonder. And though the illusion ended in blood, their legacy endures forever.